Let us turn our attention at this moment to the newest worries of the day about how that tax cut deal is going to affect our deficit because, of course, it's all being paid for with borrowed money, $900 billion. Of course, the children of this country who will pay that are not represented in the room, so it's one of those deals. It's an easy deal. You're like, you get what you want, I get what you want, and the people paying aren't here, so you know what, they can go to hell. But something often lost in the conversation. The national debt in this country has been a problem for the better part of 3 decades. Consider that in 1981, President Reagan's first year, the debt was 32% of our GDP. And by the time he left office in '89, it had risen to 52%. The first President Bush continued that trend. President Clinton and a Republican-led Congress, as we all know, got it under control. However, they did supervise a huge internet bubble and widespread corporate fraud from WorldCom down the line, and that's a nice way to boost the margins, if you know what I'm saying. Following the Clinton administration, who also repealed Glass-Steagall and gave us a Commodity Futures Modernization Act to unleash the banking bubble, President George W. Bush came in along with President Obama, to bring the debt to a whopping 94% of our GDP this year. A lot of that driven by the collapse in our economy, which didn't deliver the sort of tax revenues that had been forecast, and all of a sudden the deficit explodes. So you get economic dysfunction, banking, trade, etc. Economy goes down, deficit explodes, and here you are. How you doing? Joining us now, David Stockman, Director of the Office of Management and Budget during President Reagan's first term, and was the man behind the largest tax cut in American history. But now he calls the Bush tax cuts entirely unaffordable and says extending them would be a travesty. It is a pleasure to see you. Why do you offer those comments?
Well, going right to where you started. When we went into the Oval Office in 1981, our first job was actually to raise the national debt to $1 trillion. And we had trepidation. The national debt was going over $1 trillion. Today, 30 years later, it's $14 trillion. Now, our economy is maybe 3.5 to 4 times bigger. The national debt is 14 times bigger. Over the last 3 decades, we've essentially done a leverage buyout of the American economy. Now, I think we're getting close to the day of reckoning. And what do we get out of the Congress? A drum roll last week on we have to face the deficit. A Christmas tree lighting this week, which will give away another $1 trillion of spending and mostly tax giveaways that we can't afford, that will extend the biggest fiscal mistake in history, which was the original Bush tax cuts in 2001, 2003.
Why do you call it the biggest fiscal mistake in history?
Because if you roll back to that point, they were looking forward 10 years and they said, $5 trillion surplus. Let's give the money back to the American people. Here we are, 2 unfinanced wars later, a Fed-engineered housing boom and bust and bailouts and stimulus. We've ended up in that period with $5 trillion of deficits, cumulative. So it was a $10 trillion mistake. Nothing like this has ever been seen before. And what are they doing? They're saying, let's hurry up before we go home for Christmas and extend this thing another 2 years, and then booby-trap the budget with all of these tax breaks expiring on election eve in 2012, so another Congress and White House will be panicked into extending them again. We are destroying the economy on Uncle Sam's credit card, and the idea that this will cause consumers to spend for some more junk from Home Depot that's going to be made in China, to me, doesn't make any sense at all.
When you look at the real problem in this country, a lack of investment, a lack of innovation, a lack of job creation, America is desperate for good jobs. And whether it's this policy or any of the others, these policies have been great at enriching certain communities who have benefited from, whether it's the banking renovations, the trade policies, the tax policies, the healthcare system. There are certain very powerful interests on both sides that make a ton of money and are able to drive it at politicians because of the rigged nature of those 4 basic things: tax code, trade policy, the healthcare, and the banking system. But it's obviously really screwing up this country. When you look at what could be done, what somebody in my shoes could advocate for, what somebody who's a viewer could advocate for, what values that a coalition could be formed around to get these politicians to stop? Is there anything that strikes you as sort of worthy of activation?
Well, first of all, we have to understand where we are. In 2000, January 2000, there were 72 million middle-class jobs: manufacturing, construction, finance, insurance, real estate, the professions, transportation, distribution, and so forth. Today, a decade later, there's only 65 million. We've lost 10% of our middle-class family-supporting jobs. We've only created part-time, temporary jobs, so there's been no real growth. And what we've had instead is a Fed-engineered serial bubble that's created the appearance of wealth, that has caused people to consume beyond their means through borrowing, and that has flushed the income and wealth of our society up to the top as a result of the Fed turning the financial markets into a casino. These are pure casinos. They are not capital markets. They are not adding to the productive capacity of our economy. They simply are a bunch of robots trading with each other by the millisecond as a result of the Fed giving them zero-cost overnight money and giving them all kinds of hand signals on what to front run. This is a very bad mess, and we're not going to get our economy solved until we get a totally new policy at the Fed and a cleanup of this whole casino that used to be called Wall Street.
Do you truly believe that absent real financial reform that drives investment, drives lending, as opposed to the system you just described, that absent intervening on that it will be difficult, if not impossible, to create prosperity in this country?
I think it will be. I mean, the Fed is actually destroying prosperity by essentially funding demand that we can't support with earnings and production, causing massive current account deficits and the flow of funds overseas, and the buildup in China and OPEC and Korea and elsewhere of massive dollar reserves, which is a totally unsustainable, unsupportable system. And I think we're coming near the edge of where that can continue to remain stable.
So listen, I got to let you go, but we are starting this Steel on Wheels tour around the country. The idea is to really catalyze a jobs movement in this country and a jobs debate in this country focused on rigged trade, rigged taxes, rigged banking, and rigged healthcare. And we'd love to have your help as we try to move forward in 2011 with this jobs movement, because obviously you get it.
Okay.
Would you be willing to help us?
Certainly.
All right, listen, we'd appreciate that. David Stockman, so thank you so much.
Thank you.